OmnusI here. You know, I've been gaming for a long time. I've seen trends come. I've seen fads pass. I've been through an awful lot. Different games, different publishers, but the gaming community doesn't change. People change. And now, with all these new people, we have a lot of different new outlooks. And what we used to settle in our own community amongst ourselves now starts spilling out into social media and whatnot. Well, I'm old school enough to think that occasionally you've got to say your mind. I'm very politically correct. My mental editor is constantly going on social media. You have to these days. But sometimes you just want to go back to an earlier time. Sometimes you want to be able to put out what you think and why you think the way you do, why you believe you're right. Which means that I think it's time we take things back to the woodshed. Here in the woodshed, I decided to bring out one of my old grumbling points. You see, some people are having a little bit of a hard time swallowing railroading in games. A couple times I've seen it brought up in social media, the Facebook and everything. Railroading is this terrible thing. It's something I avoid in my game. Or railroading takes away player agency, and it should be discouraged among any game masters who try to use it. Or even worse, railroading is the last refuge of a poor DM. Let me tell you something. If you're in a game and your game master is using a fairly heavy railroading system, prodding you along to follow the storyline, you've got a game master who gives any amount of care to his story. He wants you to get through the story that he wants to tell. You may have your own notions about what you feel like doing. You may want to go traipsing off over the next hill. You may want to knock at that next door. You may want to make that job a little bit harder for that game master. Well, let me put it to you this way. Sometimes rocks fall, everyone dies. The game master is the master of his universe, and he is taking the time to tell a story for you. Now, you may be used to different treatment. You may be used to having the rudder of your own ship whenever you want. But let me tell you something. That isn't the way it always was. And it's not necessarily the only way to run a game. Now, a good game master may be able to handle the railroad with velvet gloves. They may be able to predict what you're looking for, where you're planning on going, or where you're most likely going to try to jump the rails. Sometimes it's a little bit more overt, and when you try, you get beaten back into position with the plot hammer. It does happen sometimes. It's unfortunate when it does, because you don't want to hurt feelings and everything. But honestly, you've got a story to tell. And you may have a certain amount of time you want to tell that story in, so exploring every hill and every valley may not be an option. In that case, Game Master has every right to use Game Master Fiat and put the story in his own hands. You, as a player, are being treated to the story. If you have a problem with railroading, then just take it under advisement that this game master uses railroading, and if they go on to tell another story, ask them if it's going to be using that style, and let them have your opinion on what that's like. But is it something to get all up in arms about? No. It just means that the game master has enough care that they want the story to go where they need it to go. Maybe they don't want to entertain the idea of having an open world where you can do whatever you want. Sure, there may be a few wrinkles, there may be a few side quests or things that you can tack on. But ultimately, in a lot of games, you only have so much time. Few campaigns run on forever and ever and ever. And time can be precious. Therefore, How does OmnusI feel about railroading? Well, I've used it myself. Whenever you're in a con game, you almost have to use a railroad. Otherwise, if you let your players further around wherever they're going to go, you'll never get to the end of your story. If your story has no end, or maybe many ends, who knows what the quality of your end story is going to be, what your players are going to remember. You didn't have a definite story? Who knows? It could be something they create, or if they aren't up to it, it could be a bad experience. Having a railroad and a set plan gives your structure, gives you beginning, middles, and ends, and tells a finer story. If you're going on to a campaign and you have a defined end, well, how much you want in between is up to the game master. The players may love a scenario. Fine. That's great, actually. Get that buy-in and get that engagement. It's a wonderful thing. But if your game master has a beginning, middle, and end in mind, and you are not extremely happy about being led along that storyline, well, that's a stylistic choice. You have your own choices. Any player has the right to back out of a game they don't feel like they enjoy. But I'll tell you this, every game master has that right in their pocket, whether they choose to use it or not. It's a style of play. There's nothing wrong with it. And again, if your player finds yourself in a railroady game, either sit back and enjoy the ride, or get off at the next station. That's up to you. But it's not an easy way out. It's not a lesser game. It's just a different style than perhaps what you think is optimal. And as far as player agency goes, well, you're there, aren't you? You're saying all the parts, you're rolling your own dice, I hope. If that's the case, a lot of times in the old days, that was the extent of your player agency. At least until you got into the dungeon and started choosing which doors to kick open, where to look for secret doors and such. If that's been taken out of your hands, well, at least the next time, you'll be a little bit better forewarned about that Game Master style. But is railroading an evil? No. It's been around since the earliest days of gaming. Is it necessarily the best style? That's a matter of personal opinion. But I can see many cases where railroading's just fine. Tells for a tighter game. The players either love it or they can leave it. Listen to the story, enjoy the game, complain about it if you will. I don't want to hear about it. It's just another person's style, and that doesn't mean it's right or wrong. It's just the way somebody chooses to tell their story. That's my opinion on railroading here in the Woodshed. And now that I've got that out, I hope you tell your own great games. I'll see you next time.